Hey guys, how's it going? I'm back with another video and another top 10 list. This one is going to be my top 10 players of all time, and I know a lot of people will be questioning some of the placements that I've decided to go for, but I'm going to get all of this done in one video anyway, so it's quite condensed. And if you don't understand why I've placed a certain player in a position I have, be sure to ask why. Maybe I can explain it to you, and maybe you'll agree, maybe you won't. It is all just my opinion, of course, at the end of the day. Be sure to let me know what your top 10s are as well. I'm very interested to hear what you guys think, not just about my top 10, but also your own top 10 and why you think players are where they should, or where you put them in the list. But yeah, this isn't just an RLCS era top 10. For my top 10, I decided to just include all competitive Rocket Leagues way back in the day, before there was like really a LAN scene, before RLCS was even a thing, before there was even big prize pool tournaments, when there was just small weekly tournaments. Of course, even then there were still players that stood out. Even before there were tournaments at all, there were still players who stood out and were able to elevate themselves, in the opinions of most people, and mine included, above the rest of the pack. So I'm going to be using a little bit of that, a little bit of the pre-RLCS era tournament scene, and then of course RLCS and major tournaments now, to determine who my top 10 are. I'm not going to go into like all the detail like I did in the last top 10 list that I did, because I want to try something a bit different this time. Just tell you guys what my top 10 is, and who the main reasons why I put players at certain spots. But I won't go into like all of the stats and the detail, but trust me, I did. I used a lot of tournament results and points per game stats and victory, placement stats mainly. They're the two things I mostly look at from recent times. And then of course for the older tournaments, because it's all back in the day and there wasn't that kind of info back then, I just used my own memory, tried my best to remember what players were standing out and who was considered by most people to be the best in the world at any given time. But without any further introduction, my number 10 is going to be the only player on my list who has sorry, I almost said something wrong there. He's one of two players on my list who has not won an RLCS, and it's going to be Squishy Muffinz. Of course, he has won a couple majors this year, but he's very recent still. I think a very recent addition to the professional scene, because he took a little bit of a false start there with Team Iris and eventually did make it into RLCS and start crushing it. But the reason I think he deserves a top 10 spot, as well as his recent tournament success, and many people now considering him in the conversation for best player in the world, he's always been an innovator, and that's mostly seen through his own YouTube channel, but more recently on his Twitch channel as well. And the fact that he's innovating, that he's trying to figure out new game mechanics, and not just actually find out the mechanics themselves, but how to use them in game and how to use them against other top players. That's why I think he deserves to be on my top 10. And that's why I picked out another couple of players who have had maybe more tournament results than him, maybe been around in the pro scene for a bit longer. But I think Squishy deserves to be top 10. That's why I put him at number 10 in my list, despite his late addition to the pro scene. And he's poised to rise, as are a lot of the lower players on my top 10. I think they're all poised to rise, start climbing. Maybe I'll revisit this next year and see what changes I've made, at least in my top 10. By the time this year's all finished, all is said and done in 2018. Anyway, moving on to number 9, I'm going to give that one to the two-time Turbopolsa. And I think this is probably going to be one of the most criticized picks. I think people are going to be asking, Johnny, why is Turbo not higher? And I'll save my explanations for my other players when I talk about them. But Turbo, he actually had a bit of he's had some quiet periods during his professional career and his career as a top player in Rocket League. He is in fact one of the first non-SARP veterans to become top tier and to really compete at the highest level, mostly seen at the RLC Pro League back in the day, where he was playing alongside a lot and Sniper. But after that, he had a bit of a disappointing RLCS Season 1 when he had joined Market. Season 2 even more so. And Season 3, up until RLCS LAN itself, he was pretty much non-existent in the pro scene. But of course, since then, he's been just massively one of the best players in the world. And certainly for this year, that's why I put him at second place for 2017. But before then, maybe I wouldn't have even had him in my top 10. It's just this last 1 year that has definitely like burst him into the top 10. And if he could stay there and continue to be above the players who I actually have in my overall greatest of all time top 10 above him. If he can continue to play at a level above them for this year, I'm sure he'll be leapfrogging multiple people in my estimation. But for now, I think Turbopolsa number 2. He's got, of course, the 2 RLCS wins. He's the only player to win 2 RLCS. That is his main thing. And besides that, he's had 3 other major tournament finals at E-League and at X Games and Dreamhack Atlanta. And Dreamhack Summer as well, but I wouldn't consider that as stacked a tournament lineup. But yeah, that's why I've got Turbo a bit lower down than maybe some people were expecting, just because he's had a couple of quiet spells during his career, a couple of disappointing results. But yeah, definitely, like Squishy, one of the players who I think can and probably will rise up the my top 10 and probably most of your top 10s in 2018 as we go through the year. Number 8, Devo. And Devo, I think, just pips out Turbo and Squishy, but this is very, very difficult, very close. I think everything apart from number 1 actually in my list was very, very difficult to choose. But Devo, I've decided to put him at number 8. Of course, he's a 2-time RLCS finalist, 1-time RLCS winner. He's also had 2 other major top 3 finishes. That's at Dreamhack Atlanta and X Games. But yeah. The reason I put him in at number 8 is mainly due to his own aerial innovation and his carry ability. Those 2 things really do, in my opinion, put Devo higher than maybe just based on tournament results alone. The fact that this guy can single-handedly dismantle opposing team's defense, at least it's certainly in his prime in Season 2 and 3, and hopefully he can get back up to that in Season 5, because it was really, really cool to see. But yeah, definitely an innovator as well, as kind of like Squishy in that regard, using the double touch mechanics to really expose the backboard in a way that nobody had really done it before at a professional level. And just ridiculous improvement between RLCS Season 1 and Season 2, going from the last place in RLCS Season 1 group stage round, the first round of group stage, because there were 2 group stages in RLCS Season 1. Devo finishing off last place in the first group with effort, his team, and then winning, or rather going all the way to the final in RLCS Season 2, and then staying at the top, winning RLCS Season 3. That's just a ridiculous climb. He just all of a sudden went from someone who nobody considered close to top tier to being considered in the conversation for best player in the world. And I absolutely think that at a certain point, maybe even at Season 2, when Devo came second place at RLCS, I think he might have been the best player in the world at that point, even ahead of players like Kuxer, Greazy, and Markydooda, who won RLCS. Just the fact that the fact that Kux, Markydooda, and Greazy were probably all top 4 in the world and all on the same team made it pretty hard for Devo, even if he was the best player in the world, to win against them in that Season 2 final. But that's why I've got Devo at number 8. Absolutely, I think at some point during his career been the best player in the world. At some point in Season 2, definitely start Season 3. Maybe even it's when they won Season 3 LAN, I think he was probably the best player in the world back then at that point as well. So he absolutely deserves his top 8 despite a pretty poor finish to 2017. Number 7 for me is going to be Kaydop, the highest earner in Rocket League history, one of the best work ethics in the game up to this day, and yeah, I've got him ahead of his 2017 teammate Turbopolsa, both in 2017 in my 2017 top 10 video, and again in this one. But of course, Devo just splitting them in my top 10 of all time. And although Turbo goes back longer than Kaydop as a top tier player, Kaydop was, he wasn't that late to not as late to the RLCS scene as Squishy, who waited till Season 4 to make his debut. Kaydop was actually around in RLCS Season 2, and he was a standout player in his team at the time, Precision Z, in my opinion. And before then, he'd been winning, weekly tournaments, Gfinities with various rosters. And in Season 1, he did actually play in RLCS, the second group stage, with a team called Aeriality, and he was a standout player in that team as well, in my opinion. So the fact that Kaydop's been able to kind of excel on multiple teams, and then when the right team for him came along, that is of course Galeforce, bam, world champion, and second place at RLCS Season 3 as well is noteworthy. As when I've talked about this before, but I think that Kaydop just pipped out Turbo in 2017 based on that Universal Open win, and that combined with the RLCS Season 3 online performance of this guy was just even I think those two things combined were just better than a first place finish at RLCS Season 3 compared to Kaydop second place finish at RLCS Season 3. So that's why I've got Kaydop in at number 7, but like I said before, extremely difficult to separate these guys. Turbo, Devo, Kaydop, they were all like, I could probably, even in my own head, justify reasons for putting any three of them at number 7. And you know, reordering it, and you could make a great argument for that. It's just you know, when I looked at it like this, Kaydop 7, Devo 8, Turbo 9, that looked like the order that made the most sense at the moment. But you know, it might all change in 2018. But yeah, these three were super difficult to separate. I think slightly easier to separate, and a player who, thanks to his phenomenal finish of 2017, was, you know, able to come back and prove to everybody that he's still a top player, and at least in my opinion, deserving of his 6th place finish for the greatest player of all time, and that is of course Kronovi. I've got him at number 6, and the only it was either 5th or 6th for Kronovi. So when you hear who my 5th place finish, or my 5th place player is, don't know why I keep saying 5th place finish, but when you hear about my 5th place player, it was really a battle between him and Kronovi for that 5th and 6th place, and I decided to put Kronovi at number 6. But of course he needs no introduction. He's the first player, I think, who was ever considered to be the best player in the world, before European players, mainly Flipside Tactics, kind of stole that accolade from him, and then the best player in the world tag just stayed in Europe for a long time. Until maybe players like Garrett, Squishy, JNaps, all these mechanical gods from America started to enter the conversation. But yeah, Kronovi, despite the fact that a lot of people doubted him, was able to come back and win RLCS Season 1 against all odds, and you know, doubted to this day in his team that is G2 at the moment, and still able to come and prove the doubters wrong and win E-League, one of the biggest events in Rocket League to date. And you know, there's a couple of other achievements along the way. It's not just a blank slate. Besides those tournament victories, Kronovi's had multiple tournament wins in the beta and in the early days of Rocket League. And he was the number 1 team in North America at the start of RLCS Season 1, before his team kind of fell to the wayside when Gambit stopped playing and eventually decided to take a break. But yeah, he's been there or thereabouts for the longest time, and that's why I think he definitely not only deserves a place on this list, but deserves to be above like legends like that I've already mentioned at 7th through 10th place. And you know, if he hadn't won E-League, he would definitely not be above Kaydop, Devo, and Turbo, in my opinion. But that one win alone, just proving that he's still at the top level, I think just bumped him above all of those guys for the time being. And you never know, like maybe G2 can keep up this run and Dreamhack that's coming up this weekend, and you know, stay at that highest level. My number 5 though, the player who is very, very difficult to separate from Kronovi, and the highest placing USA player on my list, and the only other player on my list besides Squishy Muffinz, who has not won an RLCS. Can you guess who it is? It's GarrettG, and that's probably going to surprise a lot of people. I know I said earlier that I think people are going to criticize my placement of Turbo in particular, but I think people are probably going to say, Johnny, what on earth is GarrettG doing in your top 5? Why is he considered one of the best players of all time, or one of the top 5 players of all time in Rocket League, when he hasn't even won an RLCS, and players like Turbo, Devo, Kaydop, Kronovi have. But I think that the reason I have to put Garrett as my number 1 player, or American player, number 1 non-European player historically, is because of his carry ability. He's a points per game machine. He has the highest points per game average over all of the matches that I use for my calculations, and I think there was a lot of them. I can't remember. I used you know, every major tournament in 2017 and every RLCS prior, both online and the LAN itself. Every single game that I could find records of to calculate points per game average, and GarrettG comes out on top. He's just an absolute monster on the stats, and it's not just the fact that he's a monster in the stats. You can see in game he's just an incredible player, and a player who really surprised everybody, even in RLCS Season 1, qualifying for the LAN against all odds, when you know, nobody had them picked in as their top 4 when he entered the league with Turtle. And I'm blanking on his other teammate. I feel bad. Was it Moses? No, it wasn't. Was it Moses? Oh my goodness, I feel so bad that that I'm blanking on his other teammate at the time. I think it was. But either way, GarrettG, I think, has always been the outstanding player on whatever team he's been on. Even when he joined NRG, who were the most successful North American team at the time, joining Jacob and Fireburner, probably the most successful North American duo at the time, he was able to just slot right in, no problem, and become, I think, the best player in that team. And still to this day, like one of the best players in North America, if not the best 3v3 player, and one of only 3 players who have actually attended every RLCS LAN. Of course, his former teammate Jacob and his current teammate Fireburner are the 2 players who share that accolade. So just the fact that he's, always been such a carry, always been such a point per game machine, and he's attended every RLCS, finishing 3rd place at the RLCS Season 3, and actually winning a major as well. He has got 1 major win under his belt. I said that Garrett and Squishy are my 2 players on this list who haven't won RLCS, but they both won majors. Squishy's won 2, GarrettG has won 1, and he's been to another major top 3. That was, I think, at the Dreamhack. No, it wasn't Dreamhack Atlanta. Where was it? It was at Gnarly. Gnarly, he finished top 3 before being knocked out by PSG. So that's why I've got Garrett in my top 5. I think he just barely beats Kronovi for the greatest American player of all time. And of course, that does mean that the top 4 for me are going to be European, and this was always going to be my top 4. It was just the order of second, third, and fourth that was going to be in question when I first looked at this list. First place was easy. I'll wait. I won't spoil it yet, but yeah, a lot of you will probably be able to guess who that's going to be. But yeah, number 4 and the 4th place, but just missing out on the top 3 of all time, I think, is Greazy. Greazy Meister, one of the first non-start vets to be considered a top tier player, absolute top tier. He was so fast and still is considered one of the fastest players in the game. But back in the day, he was so fast that people thought he was cheating. Turned out he wasn't. Just to let you guys know. But yeah, he wasn't cheating. People thought he was because he was so quick. But yeah, he's been around for the longest time. The reason that I think he needs to be in the top 4. Certainly a good bit above everybody else who's been in my top 10 so far, is just the domination that this guy's had in the professional scene since he joined with, really the first team that he made a massive splash on was with ELMP and Maestro in the Supersonic Avengers. But then, of course, when he became a member of WeDem Girls, they were just the best team in the world, full stop, and the first team that were really able to challenge Flipside Tactics as the dominant team in Europe and the world. He's been to all RLCS LANs except the most recent one. Of course, he won RLCS Season 2 in Amsterdam with Flipside Tactics, came 3rd place at RLCS Season 1. And he's had 2 major top 3 finishes in 2017. He's not completely disappeared off the face of the earth. He's still absolutely a top tier player. Just a few, very disappointing results in the RLCS group stage prevented him from finishing off 2017 with a bang. But he did still have a couple of results in 2017 that were okay, and I expect him to, have a better year in 2018. But it's going to be still difficult for him to hold on to, I think, what now is quite a solid 4th place spot in the top 10 players of all time. But yeah, he is, in my opinion, deserving of a top 4 player, just because of how long he's been dominant. Up until the end of 2017 was, right up from pre-RLCS until halfway through 2017 when his Team Envy stopped playing that well in RLCS group stage. He was absolutely in the conversation for best player in the world, throughout that entire time. That's just outstanding. That's an amazing feat, and I think he absolutely deserves to be top 4. Just gets beaten out, however, by one of his former teammates, Markydooda, who I've got at number 3. This guy used to win tournaments for fun pre-RLCS days. He was definitely, in the mind of most players and spectators of the pro scene, the best player in the world for a good while. Of course, we're still talking pre-RLCS era, I think, maybe going into RLCS Season 1. But yeah, legendary ground game, legendary goal scoring ability. This guy just, like I said, used to win tournaments with the most random teammates. He would just crush legitimate teams with you know, a buddy of his, or you know, a much lesser known or less successful pro player as his teammate, and that ability to just make the game look easy, in my opinion, makes him a top 3 player, and just beats out Greazy to the top 3, I think, just because of that RLCS Season 1 win against Greazy. Since then, I think Envy have maybe outdone Flipside when Greazy and Marky parted. Well, when Greazy parted ways with Marky and Cux, he might have outdone Marky and Cux a little bit with better finishes at X Games and Dreamhack Atlanta. But you know, doing worse in the RLCS Season 4 group stage, and also, you know, Flipside winning Dreamhack Summer, kind of it raises the question of, you know, how much better did Greazy really do? And certainly pre-RLCS, Marky was a step above Greazy, and that's why I decided to put him at number 3 of all time. But yeah, like Greazy, a player who might struggle to hold on to top 3 by the end of 2018. I'll be surprised. You know, he's a friend of mine. I'm rooting for him, but I'll be surprised if he's still, at least in my opinion, a top 3 player of all time. At one time, he would have been a top 1. He would have been the best player of all time. There was definitely a time where Marky was the greatest. There was a long time where he was just top 2 straight up. And now he's, you know, slipping down a little bit due to the superior results of some of his rivals. But yeah, just before I go into the top 2, I'll mention a couple of honorable mentions. Of course, I already told you earlier on, Jacob and Fireburner are the only players beside GarrettG who have won or who have attended every single qualified every single RLCS LAN. So they certainly, for that alone, deserve to be mentioned in this conversation. Fairy Peak, probably the best player at the moment. But not quite done enough, I think, on the tournament. Or, you know, he's not had any major wins. That's the one reason I can't really put him on a list like this until he wins a major. But yeah, definitely a player to look out for in 2018, making a burst onto the list. Maybe not just appearing at 10th, but, you know, breaking way high up there if he can stay at his current level. And probably the only other player that I would mention is Pashi, the player who was first able to challenge Flipside. Even before We Dem Girls were able to rival Flipside and surpass them. Pashi was always the thorn in Flipside's side, and the win in the very first RLC Pro League kind of cemented that. And since then, you know, RLCS finalist, the top 3 at E-League, he's still at the very top level, and look out for him in 2018 to keep making a name for himself. But that does bring me to my number 2 player of all time, and another player who might surprise a couple of you guys, making an appearance this high up the list, but maybe not. Either way, it is going to be Remkoe. Who joins the list of players who I've said are one of the first non-SART vets to be considered top tier. But the reason I've decided to put, or one of the reasons rather, I've decided to put him this high is because himself, Remkoe, joining up with Greazy and Maestro way back in the day, enabled We Dem Girls to not just like equal, but I think surpass Flipside Tactics as the best team in Europe at the time and the best team in the world. They were just utterly dominant, and that continued right up until RLCS Season 1, where Flipside were able to get the better of them in the losers finals. But yeah, that Remkoe, he was the catalyst for that team, the guy who released Greazy and Maestro in offense and kind of like pioneered the defensive third role, and certainly, well, if not pioneered, certainly innovated it and, you know, brought it to a new level. Just made it look so easy, and made We Dem Girls look so solid in a way that no other team had really been able to do in the past. You know, since then he's stayed just like Greazy at the, you know, pretty much at the highest level up until a bad finish in RLCS online in Season 4. He did have that 3rd place finish at Season 1, 3rd place finish at Season 2, 1st place finish at Season 3, and then, you know, the two major 3rd place finishes as well with Greazy and Devo in 2017. So certainly, you know, results are still coming in for this guy. But the reason I decided to put him at number 2 is because he was that catalyst that enabled We Dem Girls to pass Flipside. You know, and the first non-SARP veteran team to show the world that the Rocket League wasn't going to be a game dominated by veterans of the old game. It was also going to feature and you know, be dominated by players who only joined the game when Rocket League was released. And you know, he's I think it's pretty consistent. The top of my list are mostly going to struggle, or you know, are not the favorites to hold on to these spots as more time goes on. And the bottom of my list are players who are more primed, perhaps, to climb the list. But that's just generally the case in any competitive game or any competitive setting. The players who are at the top are generally less motivated to stay there, and the players who are, you know, still trying to be the best and prove themselves and be the best in the world are trying to get up there. But yeah, Remkoe, Markydooda, Greazy, another trio that were very, very difficult to separate, and this could have gone in any order, I think, in my list at least. But I decided to put Remkoe at number 2, just because, like I said, he was kind of the solution for Weedham girls back in the day, and that just leaves the number 1, which I'm sure probably would have been guessable by just about anybody from the beginning. But it is, of course, the greatest of all time, in my opinion, Coxer97. He is the greatest innovator in Rocket League history, I think, still to this day, coming up with new ways to score, new ways to outplay. Just like GarrettG, a points per game machine. This guy, second only to Garrett in my calculations at least, in points per game historically for majors and RLCS. So not just doing flashy things in various moments throughout games and series, but also just consistently able to bring the goals, bring the passes, bring the saves, and bring the quality hits that his team needs. And you know, it's going to come to, I think this is probably the one player in my list that I don't need to explain the placement for. Coxer97, greatest of all time, still by a long way. Still by a long way, in my opinion. Just to give you guys a quick summary of what I had Squishy at number 10. He was always going to be 10 when I thought of this list initially. Then I had Turbo Devo Greazy, or Turbo Devo Kaydop from 9th and 7th respectively, and they were quite difficult to separate. Then you had Kronovi and Garrett at 6th, 5th. They were quite difficult to separate between the two. And then Greazy, Marky, Remkoe at 4th, 3rd, 2nd respectively. Again, those three could have been swapped around in any way. So that's like the groupings, you know. There's really just 2 players at either end of my top 10 who were going to be there no matter what. Then the players in the middle were a little bit more interchangeable in the 3 little groupings. You know, the new sort of EU, the newer EU players in Turbo, Devo, and Kaydop, and then the older players, Greazy, Marky, Remkoe, I think still deserve to be higher up in that list because their domination was just so consistent from pre-RLCS era right up until RLCS Season 3, where they started to fall off a little. Marky started and Greazy started to fall off a little bit, and then Remkoe after, maybe falling off a little bit. But of course, they're still in RLCS group stage, so Season 5 is going to be very interesting to see all these guys competing against each other. But yeah, that's my top 10. That's, of course, all my opinion, and I'm sure that a lot of you are going to disagree with some of my lower placements. A lot of you are going to disagree with some of my players that I've omitted. A lot of you are going to disagree with some of the players I've included, and a lot of you are going to disagree with some of the players that I've placed high. But either way, that's just, you know, based on my opinion. I probably weigh the older era of Rocket League, the pre-RLCS, even the beta and early tournaments, a bit heavier than most people do. As most people are newer to RLC or newer to Rocket League, and they really only know recent RLCS seasons and maybe all the RLCS seasons is that was their introduction to the Rocket League pro scene. But I've been lucky to be around since pretty much the beginning, and all the stuff that did happen before I was into Rocket League pro scene, I did educate myself on. I read back on, and you know, made sure to check it out and see who was dominant back in the day. But either way, I definitely want to hear you guys' feedback on this, like I said before. So leave a comment and let me know what you think at this moment. And I deliberately made this list right before Dreamhack Germany this weekend in 2018. Dreamhack Leipzig is about to go down, and of course that's going to maybe change up some things. If any of these players are able to take down a win there, that might be enough, in my opinion, to bump them up a spot or two. But we'll have to wait and see. Could be any of these guys. I think they are, in fact, all attending. Oh no, Squishy's not. Never mind. Squishy is not attending, but I think the rest of them are. So it's going to be super, super hype to see all these players playing. And I'll definitely revisit this at the start of 2019 and see how things have changed, see how many new players are joining the list, and see what happened to the old guys. Are they still hanging on? Are they dropping off? Are they dropping out entirely? But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. As always, I know this has been an extremely long video, but I wanted to try and justify my placements as best as I could. Hopefully you can see the logic behind what I've decided to do here today. But either way, I appreciate your time. Have a phenomenal rest of your day. And again, big thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.